All right, and we're live. Good evening. I'm your host, Noel Clubb, here on Club Tracks, and welcome to Spanning the Sports World Network on Zingo TV Channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app from respective iOS and Android app stores, as the app is absolutely free. And while you download, please make sure to rate and leave a comment because we want to hear from you, folks. Yes, we do. And Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Fire TV sticks. And Roku. Roku sticks are also available on all smart TVs from 2016 forward. So welcome to Club Tracks. I'm your host, Noel Clubb, and let's introduce the cool co-host, man. So, of course, he's the lead singer and guitarist of New York City's classic rock band, The Handful. Please welcome Mr. Mark, cool dude, Duda, to the show.
Good to see you, brother. I'm clap for myself.
Right
Good
on.
to see you, man. How you
too,
been?
You too. Not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good week, man. It's super hot here, humid. I live in a 100-year-old house with no central air, but other than that, life's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. That's pretty hot then. Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Indeed.
Especially in New York, man. Woo.
I almost got a haircut, but not quite,
Thank God he didn't. Yeah, exactly. Keep the hair, man. Keep the hair. Yeah. Well, let's introduce our tonight's special guest here on the show. She's a legendary punk rock bass player, originally from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. She's actually one of the founding members of the B-Girls, and in 2008, she joined forces with, of course, New York Junk. Please welcome Cynthia Ross to the show. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Yep.
So how you doing?
Pretty good. So,
Excellent.
Noel, what's your Canadian connection? That's what I want to know first off.
My Canadian connection?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. But I was really
okay. Okay. Honorary.
Yeah, honorary. You got that right.
Okay. Cool.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you're originally from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Yes.
So whereabouts, where are you from? You downtown area? Whereabouts in Toronto were you?
Well, I grew up in first North York and then Thornhill. I don't know if you know these areas.
I sure do. Very well.
Yes. And, the suburbs, basically.
Yeah.
Everyone moved from the downtown core. The parents were in the immigrant area in the downtown and then moved out to the suburbs. And when my dad started his own business, we moved to Bayview and Steeles, which is Thornhill. Yeah. So I actually you're like predominantly classic rock focused, right? So I went to high school with the guys from Rush.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Alex and Getty and John Rutsey. Yeah. The original drummer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, small world it is, eh? Small world it is. So who are your earliest musical influences for you growing up?
Probably all the British bands, actually.
The British invasion bands, eh?
Yeah, the first concert I went to was Sonny and Cher opening for the Beach Boys, but the second concert was Jimi Hendrix opening for the Doors at the Cowbells at the CNE. Yeah, when I was 14. So, all of that, and then T-Rex, the Small Faces, the Yardbirds.
Great lineup.
That side of things was my influence. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. So what age did you discover the bass?
Whenever I listened to music from the time I was probably 9 years old, I always listened to the bass line. So I would say that's when I discovered the bass.
But 9 years old.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So tell us a story about how you and the B-Girls formed.
Well, there were 4 or 5 girls in Toronto who went to every single concert, the New York Dolls, Thin Lizzy, Humble Pie, Led Zeppelin, all of that stuff. And I started noticing that there were these 2 girls that were always dressed in black and white, looking amazing. On the other side of the stage, we never talked to each other. I was there usually with a friend or my sister. And one night we went to the Thin Lizzy concert in I think it was 1976. And then we went to their hotel after for the after party. And I'd never spoken to Lucasta, who was the one who always dressed in black. And it was the time when punk was just starting in Toronto. And there was the Crash and Burn and all these clubs and bands like the Diodes and the Ugly and the Viletones. And we've been standing around a lot, looking at all these guys play. And we were in the bathroom putting on our makeup, and I just looked at her and I said, "Hey, ever think of starting a band?" And she said, "Only every day, only every day." And I said, "What are we doing watching all these guys who can't play?" You know, I said, "We can do this. We can do it." And then I said to her, "Do you have any experience?" She said, "Well, I'm a professional singer. I sing jingles. Do you have any experience?" And I said, "Well, I play piano, but I don't really know anything about any stringed instrument." And she said, "Well, I'll only be in the band if my best friend Xenia can be in the band." And I said, "Does she play anything?" "No." And I said, "Okay, well then I guess I should have my sister Rhonda be in the band too. Does she play anything?" "No." And so we just decided, I'm the bass player, you're the lead singer and guitar player. Xenia's going to have to learn how to play rhythm guitar, and Rhonda's going to be the drummer. And that's how the Bee Girls started.
Yeah, very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So I know you guys used to go back and forth between New York City in the early days before you made the shift,
Right.
going to CBGBs quite often. So what was that scene like going back to late 70s, going to CBGBs in New York back in late 70s? What was the whole scene like for you?
Well, the funniest part was I was the only one who drove in the band.
Oh boy, it was a long drive.
Me driving across the border, and a funny story that happened. Don't ever take the Queenston Bridge. Any bands, if you're crossing the border, don't go there. So we usually went the Peace Bridge, but you know, the Queenston Bridge looked like it was closer. We looked at the maps, not Google Maps, real maps. We had the whole route mapped out. And we went through this Queenston Bridge. When we got there, they opened the trunk of the car and they saw 4 matching striped T-shirts. We didn't have instruments because we used to borrow people's instruments at that time. That was our rule. Not only did we not have amps, we didn't have instruments. So there were drumsticks, 4 striped shirts, 4 black shirts, you know, probably 4 pair of black pants and 4 of the same running shoes. And the guy says, "Are you in a band?" And I said, "Us? Do we look like we could play?" And he searched everything for drugs and didn't find anything, but obviously he thought we couldn't play because we were girls. And he said, "Oh, go on. Anyway, so that was the only time we had a problem at the border. But yeah, we used to go back and forth probably like once a month from New York to CBGB's and play there. And then we started thinking, we're playing here as often as we're playing in Toronto.
Right.
It's way better here. Why don't we just move?
Yeah.
But the way that we got our first gig was actually in 1977, there was a blizzard in New York City, and we had a gig at Max's. And when we got there, our gig got canceled. And also the Diodes and the Viletones had a gig there too. So I went into CBGB's and I just told Hilly Crystal, who owned the bar.
Right.
We sat down in his office and I said, "We're not leaving until we get a gig." He said, "Well, that's admirable." And I said, No, we're not leaving your office until we get a gig. And so then he said, "Oh, I like you. You got balls. I'll give you a chance." Used to have to do Monday night audition nights there.
Oh yeah.
That's how it worked. Anyway, he gave us a Friday night, which was unheard of. And from then on, we were headliners at CBGB's.
Very cool. That's a very cool story.
Played lots of people, the Ramones, the Dead Boys.
Yeah.
You know, Elvis Costello, Richard Hell. Yeah. And on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. Massive list of just great talent. Awesome band. Hey, over to Mark.
Hey, so when everything was going on down at CB's at that time, was there any kind of awareness that it was special at all, or was it just what it was? Because I mean, we're talking about it here 40 years later. Right. So did you know you were in the middle of something special? Did you think you might be? You did? Okay.
Yes. There was no, first of all, we have to reiterate, there was no social media for younger people who are listening to this now. So you used to have to just phone people. There were no cell phones. So you would phone people or you wrote letters. We wrote lots of letters.
Okay.
And it would be like, meet at this corner on this night at this time, and we'll all go and hang out. And whatever's happening, we'll all go together. And that's how it was. We roamed in packs. So we would go back and forth from CBGB's to Max's with, you know, the guys from the New York Dolls, Mink DeVille, Robert Gordon, you know, we would like traipse up and down the streets, and we all supported each other. So yes, we knew it was special. We knew it was something different.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, the rock scene hasn't always, and right now doesn't really support each other that much. It's sort of, you know, this is mine, this is yours, we're the best, you're not. You don't see as much collaboration now as you did back then. And you know, the music suffers for it. So
that's true.
So the B-Girls, when you said something about their striped shirts, I just started thinking about, I was watching some videos online, and I mean, the whole style thing is kind of trippy too, how that was a kind of DIY thing that's now become, you know, everyone's co-opted it, and, you know, John Varvatos sells the jacket for $2,000. We made it, whatever.
Let's put it this way. None of us ever went to Trash and Vaudeville. No one who was cool ever went to Trash and Vaudeville. We made our own clothes.
That's right. And I saw a video from you guys in Japan, the B-Girls in Japan. I think it was 2018.
Right.
And you had all your fans there. They were wearing those shirts, the black, and everybody had their biker jackets on. And I don't know if they spoke English or if they just knew all the words to the B-Girls songs.
No, they didn't speak English, but they knew every word to every song.
They did, and I was thinking, you know, it's wild because it's not just musically, but sort of the look and the fashion of it, the whole aesthetic has had that much of an impact this many years later. And on the other side of the world, how did you know to go play Japan? When did you guys become known over there and that whole thing start?
Well, what's really weird is we were always known over there. And I knew that because I managed the band and I booked all the gigs and I did all the press kits. I did all the posters, you know, I was the roadie. I was the, at this time, I was the mother superior with all
Somebody's got to do it. Every band has
There's
one.
one in every band. There's one in every band. And, you know, Greg Shaw from Bomp Records kept saying to me, because we only did one single ever, Fun at the Beach with B-Side in 1977. And Greg came to Toronto and paid for us to go into this tiny little 8-track studio where they bounced the tracks and stuff. And we did it in like 4 hours. And we'd only played our instruments for 3 months at that point in time. And we had no session musicians. So this is a big part of the story of also why we never got it as big as we probably could have, because we refused to do that. And then he said to me, you know what? We put out Fun at the Beach and B-Side, and you know, I printed 500 copies of the 45, and 300 of them went to Japan, like within 2 days. So he said to me, at some point in time, you girls have to go to Japan. You have to. And then Johnny Thunders, you know, who was one of my best friends, and the Ramones, you know, Joey said, Cynthia, you girls got to go to Japan. They love the Ramones, you know, they love Johnny Thunders, and they love girl groups, and you got to go there, right? So we never did. We never, you know, we only played New York and Toronto mostly, and LA we played during the early B-Girls days. I think we played Detroit a bunch of times, of course, and Buffalo, and that was it. And we never went anywhere overseas. And then I just kept having this thought. So when we did the Born Again B-Girls in 2017, and I got Patrick Wazell from Alive Natural Sound, who's married to Susie Shaw of Bomp, to put out all of our demos. And I said to him, we're going to do a Japanese tour. He said, how are you going to do this? I said, I'm just going to do it like the old school way. And that's exactly what we did. I got a band that opened for us in Brooklyn in 2017 at the end of the summer, 2 Japanese bands. And we went over, they booked all the gigs. They told us we were not going to make a dime, which was true. And it was fine. We just did it for the love of going.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. And probably the best experience I've ever had in my life. Seeing all these people, singing all the words, crying like hours after the show, signing autographs and posing with fans. And they all had our records. They all knew everything. They knew more than anybody. They knew about Stiv and me. They knew, you know, what year each song was recorded, who produced what. Yeah. They had photos.
It's really amazing. So far away and a long time ago, and to still have that lasting impact. I thought it was awesome. And I thought the whole idea, the aesthetic was really cool. And I wondered how you felt about that, because you guys were very original back at that time,
right.
In the late 70s doing that. How do you feel about sort of like, now you go where CB's used to be and it's John Varvatos and you got to pay $2,000 for the jacket that, you got at the Salvation Army back in the day, and it's been kind of. How do you feel about that?
Well, I write some poetry and spoken word, which is the easiest thing for me to do now. And I think I wrote one poem about that one day after I went to see the Gimme Danger movie, and it made me really sad. The one that about Iggy and.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I left, I wrote this one line that says, there's no loyalty in the sale bins anymore,
Mm-hmm.
Because that pretty much sums it up. I mean, I'm not negative about it because we're here in the moment. I'm not bitter. I'm grateful that I'm still alive and playing music and enjoying it.
And part of helping to create a style that's endured. But I think I'd feel better about it if the bands whose names were on the shirts made the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the people who first had the, wore the dog collars with the locks on them and all those fashions. If they somehow benefited from it, I think I'd feel better too. But it just goes to show how cool the style is. And I mean, you're kind of known somewhat for your style. When we talk about you, whenever your name comes up, it's, she's a bass player and she's got great style. So has fashion always been part of your thing? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up in a family where my father was a menswear retailer. And the way that I first came to New York City was when I was 13 and my dad took me to go to the menswear buying shows in Midtown, with all the designer stuff from Italy and all around the world. And then I would sneak out and I would walk the streets and go to Granny Takes a Trip and, all these different stores. And, I couldn't afford to buy anything. And then I would bug him until he gave me a certain allowance and said, you can buy one thing basically. And it would always be one great thing. But yes, I grew up in style, not fashion.
Okay.
Yeah. Fashion is a different thing.
Yeah, it is. And I, just only because you talked about managing the B-girls, I wanted to bring it up now. I mean, managing is still something you do, right? Now you're managing at least one newer group. Have you always done that, or did you just get back into that? How'd you end up working with Beechwood?
Well, in every band that I'm in, I'm pretty much the manager. And Beechwood are this young, fantastic band in New York City. If you've never checked out their music, it's Beechwood, BEECH, like the tree. And I wasn't interested in managing anyone because I'd done, in between when I stopped playing and started playing again, I had a lot of very high-level director managerial jobs in different things like social housing, homelessness, social justice stuff. And I kind of walked away from that to reunite with the creative part of myself, not the responsible part of myself.
Right.
But in every band that I'm in, I'm the one who books all the gigs and does all the promo and all of that stuff. Anyway, there was this young band in New York City and I saw them play a couple times. And I kept thinking, this is the first band I've liked in probably 25 years. The songs were great. They look great because it's important to look great. You can't just show up And
Yeah.
I mean,
True.
so
It's
Sylvain was the one. Sylvain from the New York Dolls said to me, "They don't come to hear you; they come to see you. They're coming to see the band. They can listen to you on a record, Cynthia. You know." And it's like,
right. Yeah.
you can't wear jeans on stage, you know, and don't show up looking raggedy. That was always the advice, and it's true. Like, there's always been
Yeah.
like. One of the reasons that Lucasta and the B-Girls quit the band was because I had this vision of how we should look and that we all had to dress the same. And she
Right.
refused. She didn't want to do that. She's like, I'm not wearing a baggy sweater. I look good. It's like, I
Yeah.
understood it. But Beechwood, when I saw them, they had a great style. Their songs were good. They were reminiscent of how we were, but they weren't derivative. Their music
Okay.
was new and original. And I went to see them a few times. And they asked me to manage them a few times. And I said no, because I didn't want to take that on. I was just starting to play with New York Junk, like doing gigs, doing other things with Barry Electric, with Sally Can't Dance, Cramps, and all that stuff.
Right.
And so they asked me 3 times, and I said no. And then the girlfriends asked me. And they said, you're the only one that
Wow.
can actually manage these guys. And I said, my answer was, I can't manage them because they're unmanageable. And, it was one guy especially. I said, you are unmanageable. And so they said, okay, he'll listen to you. He won't listen to anybody else. And I said, I'll try it for 6 months. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, we'll part as friends. So I got them a record deal on Alive Natural Sounds.
Nice.
We did 2 tours of Europe, and I rode in the van and stayed in the hotel rooms. And I don't manage them anymore. I walked away. I said, I have my own kids. And
I hear you.
they're in their 20s. They're in their 20s, but they're fantastic.
Well, that's great, and that's another sort of way of keeping the what's culturally important sound and style alive.
Right.
And you mentioned the Sally Can't Dance series at Bowery Electric. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about what that is?
Well, probably about 8 years ago or 5 years ago, Jesse Mallon, who owns Bowery Electric, and Diane Gentile, who was booking it and books it, and a few of us kind of insiders got together for a meeting about how do we keep this live music thing going, because it's not profitable at all. The thing that was profitable was these dance parties that happened after the live music ended at the end of the night. But Jesse is really committed to keeping rock and roll alive in New York City.
Right.
And he came from, the hardcore scene, and then he owns Berlin, Bowery Electric, Niagara, Lola's, 2 more that I can't remember the name of.
The whole kind of Lower East Side,
all within 3 or 4 blocks of each other. And he's in a great band himself. And he was like, okay, we're brainstorming about how we do something like what the Green Door was back in the 90s, which I wasn't around for, but it was a crazy dance party with DJs and drag queens, and it was the place to be. So my role was that I have a lot of connection with people that I could get to come in and be the guest artists for these things if they were in town, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money, and curate. Okay, it's a Cramps night, or it's a Suicide night, or it's a Stiv Bators night, or it's a something night. And we would do it once a month, and it was late. It was after the clubs closed, so it was just like going to CBGB's when you didn't go out till midnight.
Yeah.
And people would stand in line, and you had people pouring drinks, and you felt special when you went in. And then there was like the live bands that was almost a version. It started out almost a version of karaoke, but with these amazing guest singers who are not, just anyone doing songs by all these bands. So, Robert Gordon was doing a Cramp song, so we did that. So that was my role with that.
I even think the location is important, because it's the East Village and the Lower East Side has always been the home for that sort of thing. So I think it's not only important that those places exist, but exist in those neighborhoods. I think that's really cool. Now, after you've been working with a bunch of bands after the B Girls, and one of the projects you did was called the Electro Jets. I think you guys put an album out in the fall of 19, and then right a few months later, all this stuff happened, and now here we are. We lost a whole block of time, but it's a killer album, and it references all the bands you talked about earlier. I hear a little Mark Bolan in it, maybe a little Bowie, but it's really cool. So what's going on with that? How did it get started, and what's the deal?
Well, it's interesting because I guess I see myself as a connector. That's where my talent lies. And when so New York Junk, we started in 2008. It's an old friend of mine, Joe Stabnick, and Gary Barnett, who used to play with Joe in bands in the 70s, who I never knew. I never knew Joe, but Hillary, his wife, I was really close friends with because she was Johnny Thunder's best friend. I never even knew Joe existed, honestly, till the 80s. And then, you know, Billy, my husband, who played drums with Johnny Thunders, and me and Joe, and this guy named Jimmy Stout from Philly, we had a band called the Renegades. And the Renegades morphed. New York Junk, to me, we're doing a lot of the same songs that the Renegades did. Billy passed away. Jimmy moved to Vermont. So there's still me and Joe. And after I raised my kids and they raised their kids, I went down for a weekend and Joe and I jammed in the basement. And then we said, okay, we got to do this stuff again. And so we started playing with Gary, his friend who had played with him in his band. And then we were a three-piece, you know, the classic three-piece: bass, drums, and guitar, vocals. And that was it. And it was great. We put out a record called Passion of the 10th Street Blues, which is largely about my life and Billy's on 10th Street. Joe's an amazing songwriter and storyteller, like one of the best. And we recorded it in his basement, the bunker in Queens, where all the great music comes from. And then I connected with somebody that I knew from New York in Prague, and we ended up doing an exchange program. So New York Junk would go to Prague and play, and Phil Schoenfeld, who had been in a band in New York City in the 80s, he would come to New York. I would book them in New York. He would book us in Prague. We would open in Prague. He would open in New York. And it became like a ritual thing, like it's exchanging resources and friendship and music. And then we ended up recording at the studio in Prague where Killing Joke recorded. I don't know. Yeah. You know that band? Yes. So this amazing studio, because they came to see us play and they said, oh, you should record at our place. And, you know, we did. And then we went to London, and we were there to see Walter Lure play, who was a good friend of Joe's and mine from the Heartbreakers. And this guy opened up, this English guy, who was playing an acoustic guitar, but he sounded like Mark Bolan, and he was doing original music with great lyrics. And I started talking to him afterwards, and I had no idea he lived in Brooklyn. So he had come over to loan his guitar to Walter because there was the whole thing with not being able to bring guitars into the country, especially if they were a certain kind of wood. I don't know if you know about that.
No, I had no idea.
So Walter didn't want to risk bringing his Les Paul in. So Jeff brought his, loaned it to Walter. And Jeff's old band was a band called Gunfire Dance. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're a 1990s band. They played alongside Jesse Malin's band, Degeneration.
Degeneration,
At the time, at CBGB's and the Continental and all that stuff. Anyway, I met Jeff and I just started talking to him. I was drawn to him by the music. And then he said, well, you know, I live in Brooklyn, you know, with this Birmingham accent. And I said, okay, let's get together when we get back to New York.
Right.
And when we did, he called me, we met for lunch, and he said, I don't play music anymore. I'm an author. I don't want to play rock and roll. I'm a writer. And then I said, just come to one New York Junk rehearsal. And he did, and he picked up the guitar. He was reticent about it. And then he ended up joining the band. So he was in New York Junk as the second
Okay.
For 4 years, for some travel back and forth to Prague. And then he started playing me his music, which was, he called it Electro Jet. It was like a solo project. And I said, I love this music. Let's re-record some of the songs. We did it in my living room with a reel-to-reel. And we got this great drummer that I found. You know, that's what I'm good at. And Dominic, Zapola. And he's in a band called Mono, this amazing Japanese experimental band now.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So we ended up playing together as a trio as Electro Jets. And we recorded in Martin BC's basement, who's done all the noise stuff of, you know, Lydia Lunch and Sonic Youth. And that's where Electro Jets record was recorded. And then I finally got it out. I got us someone to put it out, as I tend to do. And then Jeff got pneumonia and ended up in the hospital. And on the day of our record release, he was in the hospital in intensive care, and he ended up moving to Panama with his wife. And so that was the end of the band, but I'm still hopeful.
Yeah, well, you should be, because you never know, and you know, so much has happened to you, and but it's a great record, and it's a little, it's weird because so many great bands of that style have like 1 or 2 records and that's it, you know, and then they, you know, like you know, the Dolls and the Dead Boys, and you know, and that sort of thing. So it does have a certain mystique to it, but it would be wonderful if you could keep it going as well. Definitely.
Well, also Jeff was the one person who really encouraged me to do my own thing, to step out of the shadows, and, you know, said, you got to do the spoken word thing. You write these great lyrics, poems, and, you know, it's time, because it's safe being a bass player.
Yeah. No, you really got to put your. It is, but you're still putting yourself out there. I mean, I've seen you play, obviously, and there's some. I was watching some tape of the Electro Jets. I think you guys played Irving, and you have great stage presence, and you know, and lots of it. So I don't know, did that come in time, or were you always comfortable performing?
Being on stage and playing bass is the one place that I'm not thinking, I'm just being. I'm in another headspace. I'm where I'm supposed to be. So I don't feel, I'm really nervous before I play. I'm really nervous before I do an interview, but then I just feel like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. Noel makes everybody nervous. So that's, you know, he's working on that. And no, we'll get back to you. I'm monopolizing the interview here.
Mark, it's okay.
I'll toss it back over to you for a couple.
Great job with that. No, great questions. Let's actually go back to the Beat Girls for a moment here. I know it took like 40 years for you guys to release your first full-length record. So I actually ask you, because I know obviously you're very strong to go that long, you know, to kind of withstand all the pressures from corporate, of course, record America, that is. So if you can, just share with us your strength and basically your struggle going to that battle to release your first record, 2017.
Well, you know, as you pointed out, we had all these amazing producers like Debbie Harry and Craig Leon, who did the Ramones and the Blondie album, and then Debbie Harry and Liam Sternberg, who did the Rachel Sweet record, and you know, Chris Spedding wanted to produce us. There was like a whole lineup of people that said, yes, you should be out there. And what I didn't understand, and it kind of feeds into something else that I looked at when I was referencing some of your notes earlier, I didn't realize that so many bands didn't play on their own records. And I was like, no one's going to push us around. No one's going to get a session musician. No one's going to send us to choreography. And Debbie actually was one of, you know, she was amazing. She was like a big sister to me. And she said, they're all going to want to take away your creative control. They're all going to want to send you to choreography. They're all going to say you can't play on your record, or this one and this one can, but these two can't. And that's exactly what happened. And she said, don't sign with anyone. They're going to take away everything. I guess that was her experience early on. So
right.
I think I was overly cautious as the manager. And we refused a lot of really good offers that would have, you know, put us where some of the other bands eventually were. But I refused to allow other people to play on our record. I wanted to do it ourselves.
Right on.
So I don't regret it, because in the end, no, we didn't make $1 million, but we were true to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crucial, really. And to me, it's a great message you sent to a lot of people, that you're standing your ground, and making that stance there. And that's a great message right there. That's fantastic.
I mean, I was shocked to see the Wrecking Crew, to see that music documentary,
Right.
and see that, like, people like the Beach Boys didn't play on their own records. I'm like completely shocked.
Shatters the myth. Yeah.
The
It
genius.
really does. And I've experienced that too before. I mean, I've hired musicians for sessions based upon stuff I thought they played. And when they get there, they're not the same players. And so I found that out the hard way years ago. But then Jimmy Bones set me straight. My friend Jimmy Bones, who I work a lot with, I was like, yeah, Mark, none of those guys play on their own records. You know? Told me about the whole Wrecking Crew thing. So you know?
Well, I didn't know that, you know, the Runaways didn't, the Go-Go's didn't, all of that stuff, you know. Anyway, we did. And the Go-Go's can really play. They're great musicians.
They can really play.
And yet still, you know.
Yeah, which is probably, so were you up against a lot of typical chauvinism and
yes.
You felt it was difficult, you had different expectations as a female artist?
Well, as I said, I managed the band, and we were 4, you know, okay-looking girls who were really trying to just play in a band. And Debbie got me her lawyer, Martin Silfen, who's I think he's deceased, but he was amazing. And he said to me, you know, Cynthia, you really can't manage the band. And I said, what do you mean I can't manage the band? He goes, record companies are not going to take you seriously. They wouldn't take a guy seriously either who's in the band. You need somebody who's a manager. And I said, why? And he said, well, because they're not going to want to talk to someone in the band. And we interviewed probably about 15 or 20 managers that he set us up with, some like really huge managers, some less. Anyway, they all said the same thing as Debbie predicted. You know, you need, this one needs to lose weight. This one can't play on the record. We'll send you to a hairdresser. We'll do makeup. You know, no, we weren't that kind of a band. We had our own look. We didn't need help with that. And then we ended up going with a guy who was one of Blondie's road managers, just because I felt I could relate to him more. Mm-hmm. But then he couldn't get us gigs as good as what I was getting us for the money, and we were paying him a commission. And I loved him, but, you know, we ended up having to pay to get out of the contract. So another example of, you know, how the music business works.
Just to springboard off what Noel said, and I know I'm hogging the interview.
It's all good, man.
You know, but you waited until 2017, right? And for a lot of your music to have a proper release, not stuff that leaks out here and there or whatever else. So how did that manifest itself? And was that with Greg from Bomp also?
Well, Greg is passed away a long time ago. But I went to New York Junk, actually did a West Coast tour. You know, we would play in Prague every year and London every year. I would book all these gigs through friends of mine. And then we did a West Coast tour with a band that we also booked in New York. And so they booked us in San Francisco, LA, and, you know, Orange County and all these places. And some people came out to the shows, and this one guy kept coming to all the shows. And he said to me, you know, this stuff is great, because we were putting our stuff out ourselves. He said, but, you know, what happened to all those B-Girls demos? And I said, I have them all. And he said, why don't you put them out? And I said, I don't know. Like, I really haven't thought about it in years. It was in the 70s and the 80s. It's over. And he said, you know, maybe you should talk to Patrick and Susie at Bomp. Bomp doesn't put anything out. They're a mail order back catalog thing. But Patrick is married to her, and he has this Alive Natural Sounds, which is a roots label, you know, classical rock roots label. Okay. Amazing artists. and they're distributed by Red Eye. What do you have to lose? They would probably do it. So I phoned Patrick, we talked, and he said, oh, we'd be happy to do it. In memory of Greg, we would do it in a minute. Because Patrick worked for Bomp back in the day. That's how he met Susie. That's how they ended up together. And then Greg and her were divorced, and then Greg passed away. Mm-hmm. So, and then I said, but the only thing is, it can't come out on a live Natural Sounds. That's not a name, a label name for the B-Girls. It has to come out on Bomp. It has to be the B-Girls on Bomp. And so he said, but Bomp doesn't put anything out. And I said, I just want the name on the record. Can't you do that? Yeah. I'll sign the contract with the live, but publicly, it's Bomp. He said, we haven't put anything new out in 10 years. And I said, well, here's your start. So they agreed to it, and they did that. And then from there, you know, the Zeros, who were another one of our label mates back in the day, now they've re-released stuff from them. So now they're doing that because they see it's viable. And I marketed it in Japan, and we toured in Japan, and I got all kinds of media for them. So, yeah.
You're a rainmaker, no doubt, you know, with a lot of this stuff. So somebody's got to drive it, you know. That's killer.
Yeah.
No, sorry, brother.
No problem, sir. No problem at all. So I understand that you work with the Canadian filmmaker Sarah Burrell on documentary.
Right.
Is that correct?
So
just
before the B-Girls went to Japan, after the record came out, I was doing a lot of radio interviews and press interviews, and I did one with CBC Radio, and I can't remember the name of the actual show, but it's the one where they talk about music and
Club Track.
Club Track, exactly.
No, and you should know this. You're in Canada. It's oh shit, I can't remember. But anyway, it was a big thing because they did stuff on people like Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell, and you know, it was at that level, Robbie Robertson, and they wanted to do something on the B-Girls. So I went to the CBC studio in New York, and I did an interview. And then I got this email through Instagram, because I don't do Facebook messages, from this woman who said, I just pulled over to the side of the road in my car because I heard this CBC interview. I'm a filmmaker. I've worked on this film and this film and this film. I'm starting my own production company. I want to do a documentary on the B-Girls, but mostly on your life. And I want to do it on my own dime, because something that struck me was about the woman's story, about how you can do everything, but you can't do it all at once, which is really true. And she said, you know, you talked about your work in social housing and, you know, all of those other things that you did, detoxes and then raising kids. And then your main thing is that you're who you are, you're still playing music, and you're putting your band back together. It sounds so crazy. And so we've been talking for 3 years. She sent someone to Japan with us. She paid for someone to come and do footage of us playing with all these Japanese bands. And then she came to New York for my birthday in 2019, and Beachwood played at the gig, New York Junk. Lucasta from the B-Girls came down from Toronto.
Very cool.
Yeah, all my good friends, Sam Harris, you know, Chuck Garino, who owns the Cast, you know, from the Trash Bags. Mm-hmm. It's like a family. So when you said it's not like that anymore about bands supporting each other, it really is like that when you have
like
a small little circle. And you know, and then COVID hit, and you know, she hasn't done much except tried to make money to, you know, support her family through doing films and TV shows and all of that. But yes, she's doing a documentary on the B-Girls, and so I don't know when it's going to be done. Kind of like my book. I started writing a book 4 years ago, and I was writing every single morning, and then life happens. So
yeah, life gets in the way. Absolutely.
Sure does. Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of a mark for one more question before we.
Sure. So, only because we're on the topic of documentaries here. I mean, as there's been such a renewed interest in the whole scene you helped create, you've worked on a number of documentaries recently, right? You want to talk about any of those?
Well, it's really Danny Garcia. Kudos to
Yeah.
him, who's doing. He did a documentary on Johnny, looking for Johnny, and New York
Yes.
Junk. We played at the after party, and
it was great. I love that. I'm a big Johnny Thunders fan.
yes, and also he's re-editing it, so it's going to be even better. Because as he got on, he's like us. It's like the DIY scene, Danny.
Yeah.
He started out. He's no money. He's in Spain. Wonderful person. Anyway, then he did one on Sid Vicious, and I said, I don't really want to be in it. Like, I was in the Johnny thing. I don't need to be. And then he said, come on, you have to, because you were there when he died. And I said, I'll only do it if you do a documentary on Stiff. So he did that.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew he did the documentary on Stiv, but I didn't know that's how it came about.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And we could have done an hour with you and just talked about the B-Girls. You're involved in so many other new things,
Right.
I didn't want to get into the Stiv thing because it's
right.
Because you're doing so much stuff now, you know what I mean? But of course you guys were an iconic couple, and
right.
Again, you've continued to kind of be there for the music and the aesthetic and the style. Not
so
fashion, style.
I think I have some new things coming, though. I've recently connected with this gentleman named James Fox, and he's called Space Machine on Instagram. Check out his music, but we're going to be collaborating on something soon.
Oh, excellent.
Cool. And also Nikki Corvette, I don't know if you know who she is, but she's an old friend of mine from Detroit.
Okay.
We're doing a Japan tour for sure, because she's huge over there. So, yeah.
They should get all your B-Girls fans to go out there. You'll pack them every night for sure.
Well, she has hers. Nikki and the Corvettes were just as big in Japan. So
wild. That sounds like fun for sure. Well, that's awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. I hope maybe we get you to come back on another time and talk more to you. And good luck with all you're doing.
Thanks. Have a great
night. I hope to
night.
see you soon. Okay.
Yeah. And before we go, where can we find more on you on social media, Cynthia?
Cynthia B Girl on Instagram, Cynthia Ross on Facebook, but New York Junk on Instagram, and Electro Jets on Facebook, and the B Girls 77 on Instagram.
Excellent. Well, hey, thanks, Cynthia. Thanks for coming on the show tonight. It's a real pleasure having you on. Like Mark
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah,
happy long weekend in Canada.
Thank you. Yeah, much appreciated. Yeah, much appreciated. Victoria Day weekend here in Canada.
Yes.
All right.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Mark. And thanks, everyone, for watching this show. And of course, please check out Spanish Sports Network and Zingo TV for all the news. Watch it, hear it, read it, load it, and download it. Love it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Take care. All the best.
Night.
Good
night.
Bye-bye. Rock and roll.
Rock and roll.